I want to introduce our next speaker. This gentleman I first met about 10 years ago, but I've been reading his stuff for probably 15 or 20 years. And I want to tell you about where he comes from first. Down in St. Petersburg, Florida in the mid-1970s, Nelson Poynter, who was the owner of the newspaper there, the St. Petersburg Times, decided to create a modern media institute, is what it was originally called. And after he passed away, they renamed it to the Poynter Institute. And for those of you who are from outside the realm of journalism, you've probably never heard of the Poynter Institute. But if you've ever read a story or heard a radio report or watched a television newscast, you've probably been impacted in some way, shape, or form by the Poynter Institute. The Poynter Institute is what I would argue is the leading institute when it comes to training journalists and helping journalists and journalism educators as well do their jobs much, much better. I did my first course at the Poynter Institute in the winter of 2007, and then a couple of years later they launched the most terribly, I'm sorry Al, I'm going to call you out on this, the most terribly named conference you could ever imagine. It's called Teach-A-Palooza, and it's a 3-day event. It's run every summer for the last 7 years, and it's about 100 university educators from around the world come to St. Petersburg and learn how to be better journalism educators. And it's the most renewing experience you could ever possibly go through. And it's really through my participation in that program, first as an attendee and then the last couple of years helping to piece it together and present at it, that I got to know Al Tompkins, our next speaker. Al is going to fight for journalists to the last day on this earth. He's a phenomenally energetic teacher. He's passionate about this, and he really sees drones as not just a journalism tool. He sees it as something that we all have to be thinking about. As I said, Al is just an amazing guy. He's going to light the stage up here. I feel sorry for everybody that has to come after him tomorrow. But I want to welcome to the stage my good friend Al Tompkins from the Poynter Institute in St. Petersburg, Florida.
All right. Thanks, buddy. So I was hoping the budget would allow me to get dropped in by drones. I sort of envisioned this as being sort of like Miss Saigon, you know, where you could feel the prop wash and all that, you know. So I can see you out there a little bit, but what I'm going to do is invite you just to shout questions as we go along. This is going to be sort of the unusual stage to audience conversation, but shout them out and we'll have a conversation as we go along. I want to say this, that I think one of the big issues that we have in front of us right now, what I heard in our legal seminar, what I've heard in a couple of the other talks today, is that too many of our practitioners of drones, drone photography, aerial photography, is that we're thinking of it as decoration, not as journalism, not as real information. And you serious practitioners of drone photography know better. You know that it is actually journalism, and you're treating it like that and not allowing it to be reduced just to decoration. If we don't believe that drone journalism is just decoration, then we will act differently about what we do. The CNN crew said today, what we need is better publicity. And I would agree with that if the word publicity didn't just sound like we just need better PR for the work that we're doing. No, I think what we need to do is tell the truth about what you're doing, because what you're doing is extraordinary. I mean, it's really good work. And I wish that we would pay more attention to that. Not to pressure you, but I think the future of drones really does depend on the group in this room and others like you around the country. How we act in the short term in many ways will determine whether or not regulators call down the thunder on us. Mickey has been saying this for years. When we act badly, we can expect somebody to attempt to regulate us. And the only way for us to escape that is to prove that we're worthy of the trust of the public. I don't know if you saw it today, but this was the front of the New York Times. The front of the New York Times today featured drone photography, a piece about how in Iceland they're trying to get trees to grow again, where they haven't grown since Viking days. It's more than just decoration, it's real photography. Why? Because it gives context to stories. See, S.I. Hayakawa came up with this idea, a linguist who's also a senator, came up with this idea that there is something called the ladder of abstraction. And the whole idea of the ladder of abstraction is that all storytelling, whether it's journalism or fiction, all storytelling includes context and close-up specifics. Down here at the bottom of the ladder is feeling. Up here at the top of the ladder is knowing. And storytelling should move up and down the ladder over and over and over again. Tell me who it affects, tell me what it means. Tell me who it affects, tell me what it means. Great drone photography is almost unequaled context. It tells us how big, how wide, how much, in ways that we can't see. When we're hovering over Raqqa, as CNN did, we're able to see the total devastation when ISIS is finally moved out this week. Extraordinary journalism, not just interesting pictures. Why? Because it gives us the context to truly understand the story. This was the stadium where so many of the beheadings and mass killings occurred. We saw it in Houston. We saw great journalism going on in Houston, where journalists were able to give us context. I'm going to say something about this music in a little while. It seems as though no great drone photography can be done without annoying, sappy-ass music. And we'll say more about that in a minute. That's a technical term, by the way, sappy-ass music. This was NBC.
This is what rescue teams are sifting through now. Block after block, neighborhood after neighborhood, completely destroyed. Any hope of finding survivors is diminishing.
Great drone photography gives us context. And then, of course, we've seen it in the last 2 weeks, sadly, in California, as we've been able to use drone photography to start to see the total devastation, the mass loss, block after block after block. Close up and context. This is the New York Times, and this is a photojournalist by the name of Josh Hayner. I want to say something about his work, and I want you to hear from him. This was the New York Times work, which was extraordinary. But one of the most interesting things was how he went about acquiring the drone images. He said, exercising the most caution around breaking news is something I'm very passionate about, Hayner told Drone Book. I think as a journalist community, we need to think about when we fly and make ethical decisions that err on the side of caution. Hayner shot the footage in 2 locations outside the range of temporary flight restrictions imposed by the Federal Aviation Administration, a fact that he confirmed by calling 1-800-WX-BRIEF. He also showed his remote pilot's certificate to police at the nearest roadblock, and they told him where he could fly without being over an active fire. No flight restrictions were implemented in the area of the footage for about 24 hours after the fire started. But Hayner and his editors decided against flying over active fires. Just because we can fly in areas before TFRs go into effect doesn't mean we should, he said. In this situation, we postponed our flights until we felt comfortable there was no fire or rescue flights in the area, even though there were no temporary flight restrictions, TFRs in effect for a very long time. The first TFR took effect as Hayner transmitted his footage to the newspaper. I was glad that I already finished, as I don't like going anywhere near TFRs, he said. It's just not worth it. Amen? My wife's a minister, it's okay, you can amen. He says, what I would say to you is this is exactly the state of mind we should be thinking about. Not just can we, but should we? Is there a journalistic purpose for this? Is there a reason for us to be there? And is there a way that we can minimize our harm? Is there a way that we can notify authorities that we're doing this so that they won't become unduly alarmed by our presence? Act like professionals. This is Douglas Thron, who is a photographer in Santa Rosa, California. was flying over an area in Santa Rosa and noticed something odd. Noticed that there was a post office truck that was making the rounds in a community that was nearly completely burned. Someone smart at NBC said, might be a story there, and produced this story 2 nights ago for NBC Nightly News.
In devastation so vast, the smallest things stand out. A toy car, a purple bandana, a mailbox still standing while everything else has burned. This desolate road of destruction is postman Trevor Smith's daily route. For 8 years, he's picked up mail from a senior community called The Orchard. Today, he picks up their melted mailboxes.
It's scorched. It's first class. We will forward it on.
His white mail carrier out of place among the ruins, until you see some homes still standing and people like 97-year-old Nora Hennings waiting for him by their doors.
Did you evacuate or did you stay in your house?
No, I stayed.
Nora tells him she was by herself when the fire swept through. And as he continues, the thought of her alone haunts him.
She was left there when the fire was burning and people had evacuated. That's frightening. She couldn't escape.
In this community, the mail is precious cargo.
How's it going?
Inside, Social Security checks, prescriptions, medications, and messages from a generation that still handwrites notes.
I took a letter from a woman, and then she's like, wait, can I have that back? I need to write a letter. I need to write more.
She wrote that she was okay, but their house was gone.
I don't know what to do with that information. That's sad, but communication is important, whether it's something you want to have to tell somebody or not.
And when the loss is overwhelming, his purpose is simple: deliver the mail, finish the route. Gotti Schwartz, NBC News, Santa Rosa, California.
Not only did he shoot the video, capture the video that ended up telling the story, he actually found the story because of drone photography. That smells a lot like journalism to me. Well, for every story we can celebrate, and for every journalist we can point to who was careful, there are stories like this. The guy from DJI said today, you know, we need about 100 good news stories to offset every one of these. Yeah, we don't know if this was we don't know who was flying. We don't know whether it was a journalist or whether it was somebody else. But truthfully, to the public, I'm not sure that it matters. It's a drone. Look at this. Urgent, CAL FIRE has to ground all aircraft after a drone was seen flying over the firefight. Ground your drones. How much did that one set us back? We were watching places burn. Nobody could go out there and fight them because of a drone in the sky. You can guarantee there's somebody just waiting to file legislation that will ground all drones because of somebody acting like that. The way we act right now, all of us, each of us individually, no matter how professional or amateur you are, the way we act right now will reflect on all of us. The public, I believe, has switched on to the position that drones, bad. And it's a slow pull of many, many, many positive actions to get them to neutral, much less positive. My friend Mickey, general counsel from National Press Photographers Association, says the law is what you can do, but ethics tells you what you should do. And as we've seen already, sometimes we can go out, but maybe we shouldn't. Maybe it's too close a call. With Mickey and Sam Stewart from Google News Lab, with Matt Waite from the Drone Journalism Lab at the University of Nebraska, and Katie Culver at the University of Wisconsin, and John Resnick from DJI, and I put together what we think of as drone ethics guidelines. And one of those drone ethics guidelines to us starts with this. What is it that drone ethics looks like? Look, we've had journalism guidelines for a long time. Seek truth and tell it as fully as possible. Act independently. Minimize harm. Be accountable. Be accessible. We understand that. But drone ethics is different. Why? Because drone ethics is actually regulated by the government. It's different. Drone ethics requires us to adhere to FAA law in ways that normally we wouldn't have to adhere to government law, like a government oversight that tells us where we can go and report or where we can't go and report, what we can say, what we can't say, what we can do, what we can't do. Now we have this overlayer of law, and maybe it's now many layers of law, as we heard in workshops earlier today. As local governments continue to put layers of restrictions on us, we have many. So we would say that the law plus safety plus journalism ethics, plus photo ethics, because that's the practice that we're trying to achieve here, all of them together for us equals drone ethics. It's a much more complicated equation. It's going to require a much higher level of expertise, which is why you're here. It's why I celebrate what they're doing in this conference, trying to elevate what we're doing. One of the things that our group put together as part of our ethics guidelines is this idea. Newsrooms should not reward bad drone use. Avoid video that was captured illegally. Now, my friend Mickey over here is already, I can see him moving in his chair because we've debated this so many times. And he would stipulate, look, always leave enough room that if it's newsworthy enough, we don't want to restrict the possibility that there might be reason to capture this video. Am I on safe ground so far, Counselor? But here's the problem. It's almost like newsrooms that say, don't go out and shoot that tornado video, but if you do and it's really good, send it to us. Don't put yourself in harm's way. Don't break the law. Don't do something that might be unethical, but if you do and it's really good, we'd be interested. Don't steal that car, but if you do, let me have first crack at buying it from you. Look, one way that bad operators get rewarded is to have their work used. They usually don't make much money. What they're after is, hey, did you see my video on YouTube today? Did you see my video on channel 36? And so one of the things that we're trying to encourage all of us in the drone community to think about is don't reward bad behavior with publicity. What do you think of that? Does anybody want to push back on that? I can't see you, so you can heckle and I won't even know who you are. It's fine. Don't raise your hand. Just yell it out because I can't see. Is everybody cool with this? Let me tell you, it's not universal. The music that you're about to hear, actually just take it down when I play it because it is so annoying. But this is on the occasion of UNC winning the basketball tournament. And you know that there were people running out on the streets, right? Annoy them a little bit. It's okay. Annoy them a little bit. There you go. Let's first of all remember that unless you have a waiver, you cannot fly at night. You must have visual observation. That's the second violation of this video. The third violation is you may not fly over people without express permission, and so far, all of one news organization has expressed permission. Any other ethical violations here? Well, one of them is that it's restricted airspace. That's 4 violations in 40 seconds. That's some kind of record, right? I think a 5th violation is using annoying music. I think that's also, why can't they legislate that? What do you suppose we're going to see here? I mean, I can't think of anything that could go wrong by flying a drone into fireworks. Can you? I mean, can you think of any possible thing that could go wrong here? You're going to get an amazing video.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed?
Don't enjoy that. I can see some of you are starting to enjoy that. Stop that. Look, this is a bad idea. I mean, wouldn't it take just one of those, what are they, shells? Shells hitting that to be a problem? Don't fly over crowds.
It has had an impact. People here feel that the reason the government's called the election is because they were able to come out.
I mean, in your wildest imagination, can you imagine anything that could go wrong here? Have any of you ever lost your drone in a flyaway because you're not too skilled? I've done that. I mean, I saw it heading over the fence row. I ground it, go buy some more propellers. All right, we're going to watch a few videos that I've edited together here. Let's count the violations, okay? Violation number 1. Anybody see a violation here? Don't add sounds. There's no possible way they got that bird sound unless they have a silent drone and really loud birds. Now, it is possible that they have a microphone strapped to the camel and they're recording it on another track, but I doubt it. Okay, while we're at it, stop flying with the geese. You're going to hurt the animals. Well, never occurred to him. Get out of the way of the firefighters. Now, let's play with what the problem is with music. So I'm going to use a video and I'm going to just edit different pieces of music on it to see how it changes your attitude. The last one was like Putin invades the swamp or something. I don't know what that is. What I want you to understand is that everything we do with drones, particularly when we add music, which has become almost the default, we're adding music as if it doesn't matter to our journalism. And yet, I think it does. Why is it okay to add music when we have a drone where we don't have any usable audio? But it's not otherwise in journalism okay to use music because it has an editorial tone to it. In other production, I understand why you would use music. I get it, because music is a powerful, powerful signal, an important emotive feeling. I get that. But think about whether or not what you're using, what you're adding, changes the context of the image that you captured. Because remember that one of the tenets of photography ethics is don't add, don't alter. Retain the original truth. And if we're going to practice ethical drone photography, it seems to me that we have to remember that we're photojournalists too. We're not just drone operators. We're practicing photojournalism, which carries with it its own set of ethics. When you add music, you have other considerations. Have I changed the meaning of what I saw? Obviously, there are other licensor issues as well. When you're using music, you have licensing issues, an obligation, an ethical and legal obligation to be sure that you have the license and the right to be able to use these things. Compensate people for their work. Then there's this guy who's become something of a poster child. His name is Nathan Porter. Nathan Porter posts YouTube videos of drone stuff. I wanted you to meet Nathan because his case is an interesting one. Nathan went to a local wildlife refuge and posted this photograph. He actually took a sign of it and said, gee, the refuge is open to wildlife observation and hiking and fishing and photography. It's closed to bicycling, dogs, jogging, alcohol, and controlled substances. Is it open to drones? Doesn't say it's not. Didn't say no drones, but it also doesn't say any bazookas or machine guns either. The fact is, it's a federal wildlife refuge, which means it's what, Mickey? It's a federal wildlife area, which means it's controlled. It's controlled. And not even bringing your lawyer with you is going to help you out of this very much. So, he was quite surprised when he got a Fish and Wildlife ticket. They came to his house and actually gave him a ticket and said, you were in violation. He was quite mystified by this and said, why? And they said, well, let's look at this video that you posted. See if you can understand why he might be in violation, besides the fact that it's controlled space. I can't take any more of the music. So then he posted this, and this was the script that he posted. I took to the sky to see what wildlife I could find. Ran across a herd of mule deer, D-E-A-R, by the way. That's a violation on its own. A group of bison, shouldn't be capitalized, and a bunch of ducks and seagulls. I wasn't expecting the flying seagulls to activate the object avoidance, but they did. Stopped dead in its tracks. Wait. What does that indicate? He almost hit the birds. Would that be interfering with wildlife? Yes. Here's your ticket, sir. He was so close to the birds that it activated the avoidance. Okay, if you're going to be this reckless, for God's sakes, don't put it on YouTube that you did it, right? It's just crazy. People just had their way with him after it was over with. Drone pilots should not be expected to perform other duties while operating and commanding an aircraft. This is a big one, and this is one that Mickey and Sam and Matt and Katie and John and I were all pretty adamant about. One of our worries is that flying these things is pretty complicated. I mean, the controls have been made in such a way that you can pick it up and learn to fly, but there's a lot going on that you should be paying attention to. Altitude, wind, weather, all the objects around you. You gotta have your eyes on the aircraft and so on. The last thing you should be doing is going live on channel whatever, reporting what you are seeing through the camera on TV And that's one of our worries. Because now, of course, it's possible to use bonded cellular technology and go live from your drone. But just because you should, just because you can, doesn't mean you should. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So one of the things that we're recommending in our ethics guidelines is if you're going to be flying, make that what you're doing. And if somebody else wants to report on what the images are that are coming out of that, particularly live, let them do that. But we've learned from helicopter pilots that you can't be a helicopter pilot and a reporter at the same time. That used to be the norm, actually, until a tragic crash in Phoenix, and now that very much is not the norm. That helicopter pilots generally now just don't report as they once did, because you have to be doing one thing, and that's flying. This is complex stuff we're asking you to do, skilled operation. So, a key guideline, one that, honestly, if you were going to walk out of here with one big idea tonight, I would like for it to be, I want to publicize the good, thoughtful work that we're doing. But a second big thought for me is this: don't try to do too much while you're flying. Fly safely, and then worry about the reporting after you're on the ground. Safe drone piloting should be your main concern. I was tempted to say only concern, but I'm satisfied with main concern. 107 pilots should have insurance. We think this is not just a legal issue, but also an ethical one. If you're going to fly, really you should be insured. It's an ethical responsibility that you have, in the same way that it's an ethical responsibility that you be insured if you drive. It's the right thing to do. It's a sign that you're serious about this. Really, two kinds of coverage: property insurance to cover your gear, and liability to cover the stuff that you hit. My friends, you are going to crash. How many of you are actually active drone pilots here right now? Raise your hand. Yeah? About half the group. Have any of you with your hands up never crashed your drone? I mean, there's not anybody, right? I can't see us. You're going to crash. The question is how bad and where. What I would say to you is, you crash in your backyard with your dog in the house. You clip the hedges. You don't clip somebody's hair. And what I would say is, you need liability insurance. Comprehensive coverage will cover all sorts of things. Top-rated drone coverage, for example, will cover the whole bit. But general liability covers injury to third party, legal defense costs, liability resulting from the damage to someone else's property, and liability for loss to a client's electronic data. This is one that I actually hadn't thought about until Mickey and I started looking into the insurance questions. I hadn't even thought about the fact that you've gone out, you've done all this work, your client has supplied you with whatever access or whatever the thing is that you're shooting, they've done all this work, now you crash it, you land it in the lake, you put it in the ocean, you don't get your drone back, and everything that you've captured is now gone. That could be a problem for you. So insurance will help to cover that loss. I wanted to know how much liability insurance would cost for $2 million for me. And so we just called All Risks and Global Aerospace. This was the rate that they quoted me. Your numbers may differ, but this was just a $2 million general liability policy, an annual fee of $385. Have any of you found a number comparable to that, higher or lower? That's cheap? Who said that? Just show me where that's cheap? That's cheap? But remember, I was suggesting pretty light flying, not everyday flying. So the amount of coverage, first of all, the coverage that you get will depend some on how much you're flying and what you're going to do, what kind of aircraft you're going to fly. So a bigger Inspire size would be more. and so on. So the larger the aircraft, and then it also depends on sort of what you're going to be doing. Are you going to be doing high liability stuff and around expensive properties and so on? And then the other question they're going to ask you is, do you have your 107 license and how many hours have you flown? So it's very much like getting car insurance. It all depends. It depends on what your history is. It depends on all sorts of things. The more hours of experience you have, and so on, in all probability, the lower your rate's going to be. Look, I'm not telling you anything new. There is definitely, I think, a growing resentment toward your drone invading my privacy. It's fascinating to me, though, that when we start looking for actual cases of journalists being accused of invading privacy, there's damn few. I only really know of 1 or 2 cases that have gotten any real publicity, and they're not really even cases, they're just accusations. So it's the fear more than the actual occurrence. But it's the fear that often drives legislation. It's the fear that often drives public reaction. And so we can't do anything that affirms that fear. See, it's a little bit like the fear about fake news. You didn't think you could get through a whole evening without hearing that phrase, right? But as a journalist, I can tell you that it just flies all over me, that word fake news. It just makes me crazy. But every little mistake that we make only affirms those people who already suspected that we meant to get it wrong, and that's the problem with affirming the fear of privacy invasion. When I see it flying above me, you're affirming my fear. And so we can expect an opposite and more than equal reaction. In fact, there are actually products like this, shotgun loads, that you can put in your shotgun and shoot down drones. Now, as Mickey often says, it should be illegal to shoot down an aircraft if we are in fact aircraft. Now, I actually asked DJI if they were the producers of this. If you think about it, if you were a drone manufacturer, you would also get in this business as well, right? So that's good, right? You can see where that would increase sales. So I actually saw this ad first because I'm constantly at the airport picking up magazines that I normally wouldn't read to try to figure out what else is going on in the world. And so I picked up Guns and Ammo one time. Let me just advise you at the airport not to carry guns and ammo on the airplane. I didn't realize what a row that would cause, but apparently it stirred people up. But I was looking at Guns and Ammo, and I saw this advertisement. I had never seen it before, and it was actually a color ad inside Guns and Ammo, shoot down the drone. We shouldn't be surprised if the public's suspicious of what we're up to. This is a little segment from 60 Minutes that you may or may not have seen. I thought it was fascinating. Watch this.
A little piece of the future.
5, 4, 3.
The F-18s are traveling at almost the speed of sound.
Mark release.
So the first test for Perdix is whether they will survive their violent ejection into the atmosphere.
Descent complete. 104 alive.
That's 104 in the swarm, David.
104 alive.
That's 100 swarm. There they are. You see them? Look at them. Look at them. They flash in the sun as they come into view.
They're going. Yeah. As the Perdix descend in front of our cameras, they organize themselves into a tighter swarm. Imagine the split-second calculations a human would have to make to keep them from crashing into each other.
Look at that. They're everywhere you look, they're just coming into view. It does feel like a plague or a locust. Yeah, so they're running out of battery.
There are reams of data that still have to be analyzed, but Roper is confident Perdix passed its final exam and could become operational as early as this year.
I've heard people say that autonomy is the biggest thing in military technology since nuclear weapons. Really?
I think I might agree with that, David.
Your drones are the biggest thing since atomic weapons in warfare. What they were trying to do with these, what they envisioned doing with these, is dropping swarms of them out of fighter jets and building up radar jamming swarms, or trying to hover over top of enemies, and maybe even do something like this. Lest you think this is completely out of the question and nuts, this is what one Nimrod did. Okay, that's just a 9mm pistol that's attached to a drone. I'm from Kentucky. They'd be going like, cool, I want that. So here we are. We have at our disposal this marvelous, marvelous technology, and we're just beginning, and there are so many things that are keeping us grounded. And my concern is that unless we start using these tools in a very public way for real good, in the agriculture world, in the inspection world, in the relief world, for being able to remote access people that need help in real disaster. And unless we make a bigger statement about what we did, how we did it, why we did it, what the benefit of it is, I think we're setting ourselves up for real regulation that will keep this from ever flourishing. I mean, just look at what CNN's had to go through so carefully over all these years just to finally get permission to use one model to be able to go over people very carefully. And the model has to break apart into little pieces in order to be able to be approved. And they're willing to do that. And we're lucky that we have a player in the business that's willing to do that, because most don't. We've got to be careful, and you're going to have to go out and talk to the police department. Even those of you who are not journalists, you're going to have to go out and talk to the police department. You're going to have to talk to the fire department. You're going to have to talk to civic groups. You're going to have to go out and tell our story about what our ethical guidelines are, how skilled you're trying to be, how careful you're trying to be, and what the real benefits are. I'm encouraging you to get out to the Kiwanis Club, to get out to the city council meetings, to get out and talk to people. Don't just wait for them to come get you. Tell your story. I liken this, Mickey, to back when we were first fighting to get cameras in courtrooms. When we were first fighting to get cameras in courtrooms, we would have to go and talk to judges, actually let them look through the camera, to actually see that they weren't making noise anymore, and to help them to think about the benefits that could come with the citizenry actually being able to see the judicial system in action. Because without that, it's all Perry Mason and CSI, and it's all fiction. But the judicial system is so much better than that. Let me see it as it actually is. That's what I'm encouraging you to do, to deliver the real message. When we use drones responsibly, the potential is fantastic. Let me give you an example.
My name is Dr. Ian Kerr. I'm the CEO of Ocean Alliance, and I'm the founder and driving force behind SnotBot. The idea behind SnotBot is to collect physical, biological data and video and photographs from a whale without the whale knowing. And we needed a drone to collect that data. The exhaled breath condensate, the snot that the whale is blowing out, is likely to be full of all of these wonderful chemical markers that can give us insights into the lives of whale, from DNA, pesticides, metals, pregnancy hormones, stress hormones. But what we want to do is focus on the science. And we want somebody else to be giving us the tools. And we need to do that without interfering with their lifestyles. And that is what DJI is doing. So we take a regular DJI drone, we put a little platform, and to that we attach a pole. And then at the bottom of the pole we have our fabric, and that gets a collector closer to the blow. It's great for us to be able to say, okay, for this experiment we really need thin body like the Inspire. Okay, they've got one. Well, we need a hexacopter. Okay, we've got spreading wings. We did see some snot arriving on the top of the drone. So we basically put 3 Petri dishes on the top of the Inspire 1. It was amazing. When the drone came back, I was stunned. We were literally dripping with snot in these dishes. We can go out and in one day collect 20 samples. It would take me a week with a 93-foot boat with 12 people to do that. Looking at the largest animal that ever existed on this planet, just flying down along its body and then having it blow into the drone and seeing on camera all the snot. I mean, wow. And then being able to do the analysis to look for all the different chemicals. Just a regular photo can give us photo ID. We can recognize individuals. With video footage, we can observe intimate behavior without having a giant helicopter or an airplane, which is expensive and dangerous. This is going to give us a whole new perspective. We can help conserve this animal with a $3,000 drone and a few drops of snot. These are clearly incredibly intelligent animals, curious animals. They've lived here for millions of years. You know, if you look in the eye of a whale, if you see a mother playing with its calf, it touches you. I think we're very focused on ourselves, and the reality is our own self-interest should have us focusing more on the environment around us. As a species, our future is in our oceans. We need healthy oceans. They're the largest mediating force on the planet. And by understanding how humanity impacts upon the oceans and wildlife means we'll be able to better conserve it. Everyone can make a difference. And I hope I'm living proof of that.
Don't you wish you had that in cross-stitch? I can tell you that we think that you have a responsibility to hone your skills and stay sharp. That's one reason why I came here when Mark called. Absolutely. Anything we can do to help elevate this craft of drone photography, absolutely. In a few minutes, you're going to hear and see some examples of great work, great teaching going on from places like CUNY, for example. You're going to see the new generation of drone photography that is currently in formation. But in many ways, the future is quite unsettled, and it will be determined by you. How we act from this point forward. What a shame it would be if a few bad actors doing irresponsible things are responsible for basically nipping in the bud all the potential that lies in front of us. The potential for agriculture, the potential for biology experiments. Mickey and Sam and I heard from a chemist at Syracuse University when we were teaching up there this summer, a chemist who's working on a program to put drones out to be able to do chemical samplings in toxic lakes, in lakes that have been polluted, to be able to just dip down and take samples out of the lake rather than going out and collecting samples one by one by one. You'd be able to much faster assess the toxicity of a spill or some sort of chemical accident. Farmers continue to use drones for all sorts of things, including herbicides, pesticides, seeds, water. The potential for this is just untapped. We heard, for example, that phone companies are interested now in using drones to put them up in the sky and make temporary cell towers out of them, just hovering up using solar-powered panels. Think how useful something like that would be in Puerto Rico, even as we sit. The potential of this is fantastic. But how we act right now will in large measure determine whether we ever get there or not. Thanks for caring enough to come out tonight. I appreciate it.